Hello, marketers. Thank you for coming back to episode 3 of the Marketing Operators podcast. Today, we are chatting about all things retention, from overall philosophy to driving LTV to cohort analysis and ultimately getting into specific channel tactics. We got a few more episodes to come on this, I think, but today is a pretty good starting point. Thank you to our sponsors, Motion, Aftersell, Haus, and Richpanel. Hope you enjoy. Motion's really like the heart of our whole creative analysis and testing operations. I mean, it's what we refer to understand if a new creative test is working, if an iterative creative test is working. It's what we use to understand our best performing scaled ads and testing ads. And basically how it works is we've created all these different control metrics using naming conventions, and then Motion just aggregates those control metrics super nicely and makes it super visual. So anytime we launch a new creative test, I can have that performance of that creative test pulled up, and then right next to it in that same graph style of formatting, I can have all of the control metrics. So here is a screenshot of what that looks like. So basically here, we launched some comparison statics over the course of January 17th to February 15th. We spent, this amount of money on it at this one-day click North Beam reported ROAS. And then here are all the control metrics we're looking at. So in this case, we're specifically looking at, most importantly, the most comparable control metrics are statics and our account-wide testing. So as you can see here, it was almost double the performance of our overall account-wide testing at this time. It was not as good as our account-wide aggregate static. So this is a scenario where we would probably give this the opportunity to scale, but we might not scale it as aggressively as we would, an asset that was also better than the account-wide static. So I love this because it's super visual. You don't have to be a data-driven person to look at this and understand that this new creative test was over double the performance of our account-wide testing during this time period. It's super clean, but you can also get as granular into the data here as you want. Prior to this, it was all manual. Like you had to manually use naming conventions inside of Northbeam to pull all of these control metrics and then manually notate them or take a screenshot of them and do that for everything you cared about. So the entire process of looking at how a creative test was doing was just super, super dragged out, not visual, super manual. Motion's just consolidated this all and totally leveled up the process.
Yeah, jumping off Connor's point, that's exactly how we started using Motion. So we had this huge data studio build out with all these custom naming conventions. So we could do something simple as what ad copy can we aggregate across ads and then look at click-through rate or ROAS or whatever on. So I've known Reza since I started working in D2C, basically when he was on Shoelace before this, and he came to me and goes, "Hey, we're building this creative analytics tool. Do you guys want to use it?" And it was a no-brainer for us. We were already trying to do all of this on our own in a really manual, cumbersome way, and Motion just cleans that all up. So if you're looking to bring analytical rigor to your creative team in the same way that Ridge does, Jones Road does, Hexclad does, you can go to motionapp.com, tell them that Marketing Operators sent you, and you don't deal with any annual contracts. It's a monthly spend. If you let them know that we sent you, tell their sales team and they'll give you 50% off your first month. That's motionapp.com.
Sweet. All right. Well, welcome back to episode 3 of the Marketing Operators. Today we're chatting all things retention, right, guys?
Yes. Retaining and reactivating customers.
Amazing. Well, I think a great place to start off with is everyone's favorite pop-up unit, the spin to win. What are our thoughts on the spin to win? So I want to ask a few questions here, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts, and then maybe we could even transition into what are the pop-up units. And this actually isn't a retention. This is more of using a retention, what most people see as a part of retention channel that's actually more geared towards acquisition than anything. But what are your thoughts on spin the win? Do you think it's a good experience for consumers? Do you think it's high performing for brands? Are there any pros or cons that you guys see with the spin to win? Connor McDonald, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, have you guys run spin to win pop-ups?
I have never ran it at Hexclad. We used to do them sometimes back in the day at the agency I was at, but I have not ran it at Hexclad, no.
So I'm the only one running I'm the only one with experience running the spin to win pop-up. I'm our in-house expert, I guess. We have only done it once, and we do a sweepstakes in Q3 where we gamify everything. We give away this big Ford Bronco, and if you sign up for email or SMS, you get free entries. If you spend $1, you get more entries. So the whole e-com experience ends up getting gamified. So it was like the perfect opportunity for us to do the spin to win, which has kind of been like, people love to make fun of it, but it works. And our experience was it like drove up our opt-in rate 50%. So all of a sudden we were capturing way more leads at a way more affordable rate. And anyway, I liked it. We only do it in this period where everything else is gamified. That's where I feel comfortable enough doing it. Otherwise, I do think it detracts from the brand value. I don't love it. But it's part of my, like one of my theories is that we'll just see more of commerce get gamified over time. So we talk about the spin to win now, but I think it'll get way wilder over the next couple of years.
So the gamification, right? That's a good consumer experience. Like people like to engage with that stuff because we don't do spin to win, but we do gamification, right? Like we'll do a lot of like buy more, save more. And people there's that gamified component of like, oh, I just added a $150 product to my cart and I saw my progress bar go up and I just saw that 75 off light up and it used to be grayed out. And like there's a gamification piece that consumers love. So that's a pro. Your opt-in rates go up. That's a pro for the brand. What about quality? Do you have any insights into like, okay, you may be getting more emails and phone numbers, but do you feel like the quality's there compared to like, I don't know, more of like a direct response offer that's going to go incentivize a purchase right away? Like, hey, opt in and you'll get 5% off your first order, or opt in and if you spend this much, you'll get a free gift where you wouldn't get that if you didn't opt in. Do you have any insights into that component from the giveaways that you do?
Yeah, we don't, because one of the unique things about our sweepstakes period is it is like non-promotional. So like all of the offers are tied around the entries into the sweepstakes. So we didn't A/B test it against like a 10% off. In terms of the quality of the leads, they go way down. On like a net basis, we are extracting more value by acquiring more emails and SMSs, but each one of those is on average less valuable. So that's how we looked at it. So yeah, relatively unique experience with us doing it during the sweepstakes.
So lower quality per unit or per sign up, but potentially more net value in terms of revenue if you can offset the drop in conversion rate by winning just by arbitraging your opt-in rate. So you got to kind of find that like inflection point, I guess, right? Of like, all right, opt-in rate's way higher, but conversion rate's lower. But if we can arbitrage opt-in rate enough, we can maybe offset that like per person revenue.
Yeah, exactly. And I am lying a little bit. We tried the spin to win during Q4 in like a very specific funnel. It wasn't our general offer. And that was where it didn't pencil out. We were better off like reinforcing our on-site sale versus doing the spin to win. So yeah, depends on the time of year, depends on what the whole commerce experience is like.
Cody, thoughts?
I've got no strong opinion on it. I don't even know specifics how it works. I am not a fan of like anything fake urgency or scarcity. So I don't know if it's real or not what's being communicated in terms of a chance to win or something like that. And so I think that's important just for long-term trust. But if you do that, and then I have no problem with it. But yeah, definitely make sure any tactic that you're using, you're actually acquiring quality, not just volume of leads.
Yeah,
ours
definitely.
was truly random.
That's fair.
What do you mean?
That works then.
Like you would actually win different amounts of entries. So it was a truly variable reward. Like other people will do a spin to win where, or it'll be like hard coded so that 20% of the time you're getting 10% off and 80% of the time you're getting 20% off or something. I don't know. So there are less kind of, they're not the true spirit of the spin to win.
Well, I noticed that Kitsch was running the spin to win like a month ago. I was just perusing around some e-com brands and I noticed it on their site. Actually, it was because Jeremy reached out and he was asking me about Amped. And since they have moved away from the spin to win, which seems to be like a more straight up opt in to get a discount off your first order. So maybe we'll have to follow up with him because I think he's probably one of the more recent ones that I've seen it on. That's a 9-figure brand. But with that being said, I think that's a good segue into this discussion of acquisition and how like the pop-up and owned media channel, plays in acquisition. But before we even get into that, what are the KPIs you guys are focused on as it pertains to getting someone to your site, getting them to opt in, and getting them to convert? Like, the opt-in rate is an important KPI, but is that the end-all be-all KPI that you're focused on? Or like, if you're testing offers to incentivize someone to buy, like what are you ultimately measuring, and like what's that workflow look like? Cody, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so ours is probably a little different and specific. We run almost all of our ads through a quiz funnel. Most of our spend will go through a hero product. So probably 75% of our spend on Meta at least will go through a quiz funnel. And so the majority of our list building is actually through quizzes. So pop-ups are, less of a component of ours. And so, for us, we track and we forecast cost per email. Just take blended spend divided by net new emails that we acquire in a month, and have that forecasted out. And then we also forecast list growth as well. And so those are really the two, main, I guess, acquisition of list KPIs that we, look at and track. We could probably do some more stuff on pop-ups. I'm definitely excited to test Amped, test some different offers. We've done some stuff which I find is pretty interesting. But yeah, it's really list growth and cost per email that we look at through our quiz stuff.
Well, what's the opt-in rate on the quiz? You guys do collect an email within the quiz.
We make it optional. I'll be totally honest. Like, we have not optimized and actually tested nearly as much as we probably should and could. So it's been a while. I think in the past we did test forcing email versus making it optional. What I didn't look at was like email conversion rates. It was more just like blended revenue per session through that funnel, and it was better on it. And so fortunately for us, even just like on an acquisition funnel, it going through a quiz does have the best revenue per session, best conversion rate AOV. And so I think there's a lot better long-term value. So let's say you get the same AOV going to PDP or landing page, compared to quiz. There's probably a lot more long-term value of those emails. So I was cool with that. We went with it. I haven't tested exactly of like, making quiz email optional versus not. But yeah, that's how we've been doing it.
Nice.
What about
what we
you,
do
Connor?
is, yeah, it's a little different. The main way that we measure the effectiveness of our email pop-up, so like the role that plays in acquisition is just like a holdout. So we use so everything that we run right now has like either a 10 or 20% holdout, and then we're just looking at the lift from that. So what that lift includes at that point is the opt-in rate for email, for SMS, whether someone converts at a higher rate. And then those are the only people that are also getting pushed into like behavioral flows. So we think of it as a lift across that whole experience. That's how we look at it now. We also look at like a blended cost per email, as Cody mentioned. That one's always a little trickier. Like I'll talk to our director of retention, because we'll get like a yellow flag of cost per email being high, and it's so dependent on the cost of the traffic. So you have these people managing cost of traffic, cost per like visitor blended, and then you have email opt-in rate. Like those things are technically disconnected, but together they work out to like a very important metric, in my opinion. So those are kind of some of the key ways we look at it.
So who owns list growth for you in your org?
Our director of retention oversees all pop-ups. So that's who it rolls up into.
Got it. But you're essentially saying it's highly dependent on acquisition performance as well.
Yeah, those people got to get there somehow.
Exactly. Yeah, I've kind of dabbled. We've got it under retention, but same thing. It's highly dependent on many factors, one of them being acquisition. If we for whatever reason we have a product launch and we stop running as much of our traffic through a quiz and it goes straight to PDP, like our list growth is going to drastically change, and nothing that the retention did. So I hear you there.
I think like I could see pop-ups rolling up under like e-com technically. I'm like, that actually feels way more of like a web experience touch point than a retention thing. And obviously those people need to work together, but that's the case with most channels anyway.
I'm with you there.
Yeah, we've been I've been like pushing our director of retention. We've been working at this a lot to like try to establish a revenue metric as much as possible for these pop-ups. So we are also measuring opt-in rates, but we did like a totally different offer year over year, like Q1 2023 to Q1 2024. So we are comparing opt-in rates, but this new offer we have it's more so incentivizing your second order. So we were looking, at all people that had opted in to both offers over the same time period year over year, and then giving also the same amount of time to convert. what was the overall lifetime revenue over that like 3-month window. So what we found is that the opt-in rate on this new offer, which we have it was lower than the one last year, and we have some ideas to improve that. But the lifetime revenue was better on this offer out of all people that had placed an order after opting in. So we're like, all right, great. This is ultimately the metric, like what we want to be driving here is more lifetime revenue from people. We can just improve that. It's kind of the way that you might look at a thumb stop ratio and iterate on like an ad that has high 1-day click ROAS. You might say, oh, well, thumb stop's low. We could increase 1-day click ROAS if we can get thumb stop up. We almost are trying to take that approach now with our opt-in rate, where it's like, yeah, the opt-in rate's important, but it's almost like a soft metric that can just lead to a better revenue metric. So our director of retention is really, really good with analytics, and we have a really awesome CDP that we work with to like create these reports. But we're trying to do a better job of that this year, is like connecting these pop-ups to a revenue metric.
So we just did this a little bit like what you're describing, because we both laid out like blended cost per email, opt-in rates, et cetera. They're ultimately what all brands are optimizing for is like revenue generated from site visitors agnostically. Like if you told me you'll make more money not collecting any emails, then we would do that, right? But ultimately we're trying to find the balance of how many people can we collect and own a relationship with over time, and that is what will lead us to the highest like total value per site visitor or something. And like an interesting experience we had recently, we tested cashback, and cashback was, there's like a lot to it. I won't go too in detail, but we essentially ended up like dramatically increasing opt-in rate. But along with opt-in rate, because it was a stronger offer, we increased open rate, click-through rate, conversion rate. Like we ended up seeing like all of these downstream effects of just having a stronger offer to begin with. And it ended up like dramatically outperforming us just looking at like a 10% discount or something like that. But what we didn't have in that test was we didn't have a holdout of nobody getting anything at all. We just tested 10% discount versus the cash back. So there's still a little bit of a caveat in the result of that test, in my opinion, but just an example of all of the consecutive touch points that could benefit from that initial messaging.
So how are you facilitating that holdout, Connor? So you're saying like 10 or 20% you're not giving a pop-up to at all, and then the rest of the traffic you're giving your pop-up to, and you're measuring the performance of those two different holdouts over time, I presume. Like what's that process / like tooling look like?
Yeah, so we do that with Wunderkind. And we do that with Wunderkind. That's one of like the key parts of their platform, is they want to justify their value. So they're measuring the conversion and revenue lift of like their whole pop-up and behavioral email experience.
All right, so okay. Here is kind of my question, and I guess my little hot take on this thing is, I find retention to be interesting. It's definitely not my favorite subject, as you guys know, and I think part of it is because it doesn't necessarily get the same scrutiny at a lot of brands that acquisition does in terms of being accountable to certain performance, financial performance, contribution margin, incrementality as well. I guess because there's a lesser cost to it associated. Like you don't really necessarily need to know if you're, as incremental or not. But I find that so much of retention tactics don't get properly tested. And that's why I'm super curious and like where this conversation's going. Like would love to hear how you guys do it at HexCloud as well, because I think there's a lot that we could probably build out that I'm trying to take in this direction. So we actually know what's impacting the KPIs we care about. So many times people look at email performance and they might look at click basis or SMS as well, or pop-up performance. And yeah, this is conversion, but like, you guys said, and you guys are obviously the 1% way ahead of everybody. But, we don't always know that these things that we're doing are actually improving like the main KPIs we care about, where I feel like not always, but we're closer to that on the acquisition side. Most brands are a little closer to it. And it just takes probably a data team or a CDP or an amazing partner that can help you with that. What do you guys think?
Well, one, just to call this out, you say that it doesn't get the same level of scrutiny. I mean, Klaviyo's the one walking around saying you get like a 35x ROI on their platform or whatever. Like that whole like meme of these like insanely high ROI numbers come from like post-acquisition channels. I wouldn't call them retention specifically.
We are more than 15 minutes into the episode, so I'm allowed to swear. That is total bullshit. All of them that do that. If your provider is reporting to you, like I think the simplest thing you should do if you're working with any email or probably more importantly, an SMS provider or a direct mail provider, make them run holdouts. Don't go off ROAS, go off iROAS. That's like the simplest thing to do. And that's what we make them do. But yeah, I'll say that.
Which is just super, super uncommon. But yeah, I mean, you're totally right about that. And then your second point around like measuring the true impact of something, because like we have the holdouts on the pop-up, so we get some sense of like the general lift of offering this whole experience, which is fine. And then when we actually start thinking truly about retention, like A/B testing offers in the post-purchase series or things like that, like we're getting directional data. We're like measuring 2 emails, but like it's really hard to. I mean, we don't do this, but like looking at it at the cohort level, like that's actually what you want to do is like hold out an entire like 30-day experience for a group of people and then measure all of the impact of your marketing efforts. I think one of the reasons that that's not more popular is like, I'd say email is relatively cheap. You know, it's like, it's easy to overlook that cost. You're like, all right, I'm sending millions of emails. It's costing me a couple grand a month. SMS less so. That's where we're like thinking about incrementality right now. We're doing a bunch of tests in April around that. So yeah, anyway, those are my quick thoughts, but it's really an intriguing development.
I'm 100% with you. I think that's why email is very cheap. SMS is more expensive. Direct mail is more expensive. For me, it's still time, like our team's time. If they're going to go and rework these post-purchase flows, like I want to know that that's actually doing something instead of moving click-through rate by 10%. You know, I want to know that that's actually worthwhile. And then, of course, if you're putting offers in there as well, you want to then know, you know, is giving that 10% discount or that free ship worthwhile compared to the revenue lift we get? Because there's probably so many brands. I don't get how this became best practice in our industry. 10%, 20% welcome pop-ups. I bet so many brands have put that up, have no idea if that's actually doing anything or just diluting margin. I feel like in an industry where our variable costs are many, you know, if we don't have to do that and maybe you can give a free ship code instead, or you don't have to, or you can do cash back, or you don't have to actually do an offer and you can still get emails. There's got to be so much wasted margin that brands are leaving on the table by just giving offers without testing anything.
Yeah. I mean, I think most brands are getting their basic stack set up and they're not thinking, I mean, I think you need to do that first, right? Like, it's like, how can we get, like, do we have all the pre and post purchase flows built out? Are we sending all the campaigns at a cadence we need to send at? Because that's the most important. But then, like, at least for us, we spent a lot of time doing that last year. And in the back end of the year, we really started to come back to some of these things and start to do these tests and like figure out what the most optimized version of all these tactics were. So like one example, we always do a retention offer and an acquisition offer for all of our sales, because most of the time we're trying to incentivize a repeat order. And the way we do that is by offering offers on products that they obviously didn't buy in their first order. So we tested into this retention offer last year. We had like 3 sales in a row where we basically took our entire retention cohort and divided it into 3 to 4, you know, groups, and each group was siloed into one offer the entire sale. And we like had this huge lift with like our dev team and convert.com to build out like a custom experience that was like driven by UTMs based on the offer and campaign you got. And we ultimately were able to, you know, look at UTM data at the end of the sale and say, hey, this offer by far drove the best contribution margin, you know, per order. And now we have like a super optimized retention offer, but no one talks about this. No one talks about like, how do you set that up? Everyone wants to talk about acquisition and how you set up acquisition tests and holdout tests and how to structure an ad account. But like us testing into that best retention offer, if we were to turn off ads today, like that's what we're going to lean on to drive revenue for the business. Like there's an argument to be said that that's probably more important to test into than maybe an optimized acquisition setup, but it just doesn't get talked about. And so a lot of that early on process was like, we had to figure out how to even set that up, because it's a fairly complex build. And if you don't set it up correctly, then you get to the end of it and you have bad data, right? So maybe it's up to us to bring the conversation of incrementality and testing to retention.
All of us are Haus customers and very big fans. In fact, I've actually been told I talk about Haus more than my own daughter. So what is Haus? Haus is a marketing science and experimentation platform that enables you to measure true incrementality and allocate budget efficiently to maximize growth and profitability. Haus allows you to comprehensively measure your marketing across all channels to measure the true incremental impact of all of your channels on retail, Amazon, DTC, etc. Haus allows you to design and launch experiments in minutes and get results in as little as 2 weeks. So we are all actual customers of Haus. We all use it. I actually got the both Connors onto it. I was just such a big fan, and I just couldn't help but share some of the tests that we were running. And I thought it was super cool. And I knew we had a group chat going, and I knew that both of these guys were spending on a lot of different, channels and platforms. And we were all looking at things similarly, but really looking to kind of take a step up. So yeah, if it's good enough for me to sell these guys on it, I think it's good enough for you guys to try out.
As you can tell, we could do a whole episode about Haus, and we probably will at some point, but this is just the ad read. So if you want to add marketing rigor to your organization and make the most impact with your spend, go to haus.io/operators. That's haus.io/operators to learn more. Yeah, so just quickly, I actually have a clarifying question. So you said 3 sales last year. In each of those sales, during the sale, you would have a different offer just for customers?
Exactly. So like, as an example, like we started off with very big swings and then we moved into smaller and smaller swings. So like one of the first tests we ran was like 2 GWPs on certain order thresholds and then two flat percentages off. And then we found that the flat percentage off outperformed. Again, this is looking at like Shopify UTM data for these different cohorts. And we just make sure we knew what we were testing up front, so we could put that into the campaign name. So we tested into the flat percentage off. Then the next sale we tested, flat percentage off those same 2 tiers versus buy more, save more one. And then the third sale we tested into 3 different buy more, save more like structures, like different thresholds, like less thresholds, more thresholds, until now we have this like optimized retention offer that we now do a version of for a lot of our sales. Not all of them, because we like to keep it fresh for that cohort of people. But there's a ton of analytical rigor that our director of retention and myself were collaborating on throughout the duration of this. But like now we have a super optimized offer for people that have bought from us before. Like we know what works, and not that we won't test more, but we don't test as much now because now we're focused on optimizing other areas of the retention stack. Like our 12-piece set is a good example. Like if someone buys a single 12-inch pan, should I try to upsell them right to a 12-piece set, or should I try to upsell them to a 6-piece set? Like right now, we're doing it to a 12-piece set, but ultimately we're going to do a split test and see if a 6-piece set does drive a better revenue per recipient. But like you gotta have these things set up. You gotta be moving the needle on these things, or you get stagnant and you I don't know, you're just not getting insights. Like to your point, Cody, like I think so many brands have these offers and these flows set up and they think they're working, but could they be working 15% better if they tested into a more optimized version? I mean, probably.
Yeah, I think there's just so few less dollars available, and there's less incentive to build the tech out. There's probably less incentivized, to have SaaS partners that do it, and it probably takes a really sophisticated in-house team, either a partner probably like Wonderkind, and I think they're really only relevant for pretty large brands, or it takes building a data team and a warehouse internally, or a CDP like you guys have. So that's where I'm going with it. Like I really want to get there so that we can run these tests and run a 30-day holdout. And there might be a sponsor of the show that does an amazing job of incrementality tests for acquisition that I'm trying to get to build this product. And I might get in trouble for saying this here, but I'm just dying for them to build it because it'd be so easy for them to do. So if you want this, email olivia@haus.io and let her know. Because it would be so easy, but it would be so much value to be able to run these tests and just be like, hey, I'm going to set up this holdout in the background. I'm going to, 30 days, I'm going to go this offer versus this. And I actually want to see what our repeat rates look like, not revenue per session. And I'm not saying don't track revenue per session or revenue, but don't have it be your main KPI. And I actually want to look at repeat rates and LTV over time. And I don't think there's a great way to like track that and segment that out personally.
Yeah, I was gonna double click on the, we've been calling them intra-campaign offers. I'm super excited about this too. We just did our first one for our sweepstakes last year. So I just said it wasn't a promotional period. It was only promotional for existing customers, because actually, and we'll probably get to this as well, but we have like an evergreen LTV offer where you purchase. How are we retaining that customer in the first 14 days, essentially? How do we make them more likely to place a second order? So we've got that. But that is typically during a non-promotional period. We enter a promotional period like Father's Day or Q4. A lot of those savings are site-wide, so we can't offer that same LTV offer throughout that period. So we introduced a new one, which we call as intra-campaign offer. Right now, we just do an additional 10% off, but just that small increase in giving like a unique value to existing customers has made a really big difference. So what ends up happening is we have this general LTV offer, then we go into a sale period, we have an intra-campaign offer, and then post-sale period, we actually make a concerted effort to then reactivate all those brand new customers we got during a Father's Day or a Q4. We're back at more or less full prices on the site, so we can offer a brand new kind of promotion to reactivate them. And I've really we felt like we've unlocked a lot of value with that three-pronged approach. So I'm with you, Connor. I think there's a lot of value in just being slightly more nuanced when it comes to retention at different points of the year.
I have a question. So on a lighter note, how do you guys measure retention? If you're just looking holistically at, email performance, Rich, Connor, you mentioned, 30-day attribution windows. Like, how do you measure it? How do you have your teams report on them, both on a, email and an SMS perspective?
Yeah. So in a case like that, we're really looking at returning customer revenue. So like when we did this during our sweepstakes period, we were just looking at what is the rate that we increased returning customer revenue in this period? What did it look like last year? And like using that historical information to like get directionally whether we're driving a lift or not. The other big one for us is just cohort reporting. So like, how are we, if we're building out more thoughtful LTV flows, how are we reactivating those people? We'll look at, I'll give you another example. None of this is like clean reporting. All of this is like, gets manually done every couple weeks as we like check back on these things. But in Klaviyo, you can look at like LTV by people who opened or didn't open your post-purchase series, things like that. So that's kind of how we'll be teasing it out. But then a lot of the like decisions that we're making, as I mentioned earlier, we're making on like we'll split test a whole flow, and then we'll make a decision based on the value of each of those flows, which is problematic, but like that's the way we're doing it now.
And then what about just general campaign revenue? Like if your retention team is reporting to you, like, do you want to see how much revenue email provided that month or how much SMS provided? And if you even look at that at all, like you look at, for us, we go, and I can share how we do it. We look at, just repeat revenue as a total, right? We have cohort, numbers that we try to hit for each month to make up our total forecast. And then we will forecast email and SMS as a whole. So we'll forecast, we'll pick kind of a percentage of revenue that we think based on GA data. So GA4 data for email, and then for SMS just as like a channel level. And just looking at it directionally, I don't think that captures the full value. It's, a last click. It's just a click-based thing, but I think just directionally it's pretty accurate. So we say like, hey, that's, 20% for this month based on historical. And then we'll have a goal for that just to have it something we can pace to. And then if we're behind, let's say some emails didn't perform as well as we wanted, we're like, hey, we got to send out an extra one this week to make up that revenue, or maybe our flows aren't bringing in what we expected. Let's push more. So we look at it on a click. I really don't look at any like Klaviyo or like SMS reporting. So curious how you guys do that.
We look at, I'll answer quickly and then I'll hand it to you, Connor. We look at Klaviyo revenue. Like a big one for us is, we'll look at both Klaviyo revenue, like year over year. Let's just look at total campaign revenue. We'll really look at revenue per send. So whether that's going up or down, is like, are we sending higher revenue emails or are we just sending more emails? And then I typically, so my retention director doesn't look at this as much, but within Northbeam, so the equivalent of that GA view where I'm like, let's just look at own channels on a last click basis. Where are we year over year? We just made this decision in March where we were pacing well below where we wanted. So we ended up like adding some additional offers and like opening up segments a little further. So that's how we do it.
Okay, cool. Very cool.
Yeah, I think we look at as far as like the bottom line retention metrics, like how is our retention program trending? It's year over year for returning customer orders and returning customer revenue. I like that metric. I don't love it because that's very much a function of like if we're adding a ton of new customers, like naturally we should be able to grow that pretty easily. So actually retention is probably the most convoluted in terms of all the metrics we track, because we track that, but then we're also tracking other metrics to like cut through some of that acquisition noise. So we're also measuring cohort growth in terms of order numbers year over year. So like 2, 3, 4, 5+ orders, because that's, obviously that's more independent of, how many new customers we're adding to the ecosystem at any given time. And then we do track LTV. We're still figuring out the best way to do it. We're not a consumable brand, so I'd be really curious, Cody, actually to like discuss how you think about this. But what we're working towards right now is to basically track like, so looking at 2023 lifetime value, like a 12-month LTV of all first-time orders that happened that year, and then like pulling averages for 3, 6, 9, and 12, and then also doing that for 2024, and basically seeing how we're comping like all first-time orders in 2024. Are we growing their value over that same 3, 6, 9, 12-month window the same way that we were for 2023? And just trying to like beat those numbers, really. Like, are we doing what we need to be doing in product development and the number of touch points that we're putting out there to like beat those 12-month LTV numbers? Still wrapping our head around that one a little bit, but we also are tracking UTM based as email and SMS revenue, just like you said, Cody, as a directional metric, kind of like the same way that we all agree, like post-purchase survey is not a net end-all be-all number, but it is helpful directionally. So we're doing the same thing there. It's like, hey, if we're coming in below our core bottom line retention goals, can we go into like the email, SMS, UTM based revenue numbers and like back into some conclusions? And we can break down that down even further, like campaigns or automations, but it's more directional than it is anything, and it's more of like course correction if we're not hitting our like core blended like back end returning customer order KPIs.
Well, one thing I'll add, you mentioned you guys take the average 3, 6, 9, 12-month cohort values of 2023. And then like right now you could be comparing the 3-month value for 2024, at least for like early January orders.
Exactly.
Yeah. You should, because one interesting thing for us is there is like seasonality. Like we know the cohort, if you subtract like the LTV from, or like a 60-day LTV from the initial order value, we have higher cohort values in like October. So the customers that we acquired just before a big sale period are worth a little bit more. So that would throw off that average a little bit. So there's like, we use lifetime lane. You just break down by month. And then the other thing that I'll say is, at least what's been tricky for us is as we acquire different types of new customers, our cohort values change dramatically. So our whole business has been built on acquiring new customers. Our wallet's guaranteed for life. Most guys only own one. But like our ring customer, the 30-day LTV is like 3 times as high. So we're seeing like insane returning customer year-over-year growth. That's not necessarily from a more effective retention program. It's because we happen to be acquiring customers who are worth quite a bit more in that period. And that's kind of, I feel like, Cody, you're smiling a little bit. You're like, yeah, that's what it's all about.
No, I spend probably a very small percent of my time on retention, and I don't claim to be an expert in it by any means. I think I know a thing or two about growth and acquisition, but I think partly because I feel like it can be really futile and it's very hard to impact. And I find it so funny, like when we talk about retention, everyone's like email and SMS, but there are much bigger levers and drivers in terms of that. Product is probably the most important. There's some stuff for channel and things like that, but I haven't seen that much data that like retention efforts can really meaningfully impact LTV. So much of it is by, first of all, product category, and then by product as well. And so I guess I'd rather focus on those things rather than, how are we upselling or doing things like that. And it's not to say it can't, but I just feel like those are the most important things, as you said.
You're also, Jones Road, you guys are blessed with such a great LTV product.
Not as good as you would think, I think. Like it's not bad, don't get me wrong, and it's definitely better than, selling a mattress or something like that. But it's not subscription, it's not consumable. So we ran some analysis, last year on if we optimized for contribution margin on first purchase, or if we kind of took our cohorts and figured out what it would be throughout the year. So if we acquired somebody in January, we look at contribution margin over 11 months. And then if we look at, February, we're looking over 10 months and so on and so forth. And what we found, and there's obviously risk associated with that of, being less profitable on first purchase or maybe breaking even on first purchase. It didn't really move the needle significantly. There'd be more risk, more growth associated with that.
Sure.
And it didn't really provide that much more profit. So the risk reward didn't really make sense for us. And so we definitely have LTV, and we definitely make, a good amount of our revenue. It'll probably be 45% of our revenue this year from repeat customers, maybe, 40 to 45%. So it's definitely pretty strong. But a lot of that I find is from stacking the quantity of those cohorts and not necessarily improving the percentages of those. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it would be worth it as we get more people. It'd be worth it to improve the percentage of those. I just haven't found that we can make a very meaningful difference in that. And I think that's why I'm so big on testing these things. And it's all I talk about is like, I want to find incrementality because I want to know that the resources, the people we hire, the marketing dollars that go out there, the time we spend is actually going to be worthwhile versus just working on these flows and trying to revamp them. And ultimately it's like trying to make it to the NBA with 5-6 and shit genetics. Like no matter how hard you work on it, you're not going to really be able to improve it. So I don't know. That's how I feel about it, at least.
Yeah. We are super excited to talk today about one of our sponsors, Aftersell. All three of us, Jones Road Beauty, Hexclad, and Rich Wallet, are customers of Aftersell. If you're selling on Shopify, you need to find ways to boost your average order value. One of the best ways to do this is cross-selling and upselling, and there are a lot of different ways and places you can do this. One of the best places to do it is right when that conversion is happening, and that is exactly what Aftersell facilitates for you. So what actually is Aftersell? Aftersell is a widget that you install on your website, and on the post-purchase page, right after someone's completed their conversion, they're basically getting this upsell and or cross-sell. It's super seamless. It's one click. And it adds it to the order. They do not have to go through checkout again. It's really just free, not free, but it's incremental revenue that you're getting from someone that's already bought from you. One thing I love about Aftersell is you can decide to optimize it a ton or not at all. Either way, it's going to drive you a ton of incremental revenue. And if you have the team and the bandwidth and you want to optimize it, you can do all sorts of analysis on which products are most likely to be bought with other products, doing those sequential order and market basket analyses. And you can literally build out different funnels, as many as you'd want for different products, depending on what that first ordered product was, and then upsell them super intentionally based on that first order product. So love Aftersell. It's driven 6 figures of incremental revenue for us in a very short period of time. And I highly recommend it. If you want to check them out, head over to aftersell.com. So Cody, how do you? I wanted to dig into this with you a little bit because I think Ridge and Hexclad have a more similar customer journey in terms of like very much a first order driven product. Like we need to be profitable on first time order. We get repeat orders, but it's not as strong as a food brand, right? Like I've seen some brands that are like optimizing for a like month 4 break even because their LTV is so good, and then month 8 or 12 or whatever, they have this profitability goal. So they're thinking through this like year-long post-acquisition window, which to me would be really stressful. But obviously a lot of these brands have their unit economics and their LTV numbers super dialed. So they know exactly when they're going to break even for the most part. But it sounds like you're not taking that approach. So are you thinking of are you trying to optimize for first order profitability? Are you breaking even? What's that look like in your head? In terms of like how you're thinking about profitability on first order and growth and profitability over time?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, I mean, our kind of foundation is, cohort forecasting. So, we layer on acquisition assumptions and what percent of them will purchase over time and have those stack up. But when we look at, contribution and we've, modeled it out, it's not worth the risk to us to be able, to try to go negative on first purchase. Our LTV isn't good enough, and maybe it even is good enough, but it's not worth the risk. It doesn't give us that much extra profit at the end of the year. It gives us a lot more revenue, but it takes much longer to realize that profit, if ever, right? Because you have to make sure your assumptions are actually accurate, which means there's a lot more risk associated with that. There's worse cash flow implications. And right now, at least, I think you want to tap into levers of growth when you need to. Jason talks about this, and operators is like, why do I have to do it now? And so we've been able to grow being profitable on first purchase, and we still have room to grow there. So for us, it just doesn't make sense. When we forecast the total business and where we think our, P&L will land, yeah, we definitely take those cohorts into account. But when we are, acquiring right now, we're still looking on, what will maximize contribution margin on first purchase, and then we'll just take what we can get as like icing on the cake after that.
So is that when you talk about cohorts, then can you talk about that a little more? Are you talking about product cohorts, like a first time order on Miracle Balm versus first time order on this product, and basically having different expectations for each? Because I'm like we're in the process, like we're on the 5-yard line of building out some new funnels around some different product offers. And that's, at least up front, that's what our thought is, right? Is like we need to be looking at first orders on 12-piece sets very, very, very differently than we're looking at first-time orders on, let's call it a hex mill, both from a first order contribution margin standpoint, but also just understanding like how does their value change over time? Because my expectation is that as a percentage growth, the hex mill should grow much faster than the 12-piece set just based on first order AOV. So I'm curious, like, how are you breaking down those cohorts, and like what's the like thought process with that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I guess for me, everything starts blended. So, a cohort will just look at by month, and we'll just want to say, hey, if we acquire 100 customers in January, right, a certain percent of them, well, let's say 20 of them are going to buy again in, February. And then of those, maybe 10% are going to buy in March, and then 8% and 5% and 4%. And you do that same exercise for February acquisition and then for March acquisition. And then that's kind of how we forecast our repeat revenue over the year. And then we can certainly play around with, hey, maybe a 2.0 AMER got us 100 customers. What happens if we go to a 1.5? Well, maybe we can get 150 customers. What's that do to contribution margin over the month, over the year, and kind of see what's that right, balance between volume and efficiency. So that's kind of how we start and look at it. And then we do definitely look at how can we slice the cohorts. I think by product is probably one of the best ways to do it. You can look by channel as well. But I think by product is great. And we will see, and we do have, specific funnels depending what product somebody buys. For us, we don't do a lot of offers. Like we really don't do any discounting. We don't really do any offers. So a lot of ours are more educational. We try to think if somebody doesn't buy, why didn't they buy? Well, they probably didn't like the product, and we want to do everything we can. There's a pretty steep learning curve to our products. So we want to do everything we can to make sure they have the right information and education to make sure they're using it correctly, using the right amount. I won't go into makeup specifics with you guys, but that they're using the right amount, that they're using the right things. And then we also look at, obviously, I'm sure you guys do, product journey and basket analysis to see what would be the best product to recommend. And we're not discounting it, but we'll just say, hey, if you liked it, this goes really well with it. Or hey, if you're finding it sticky, maybe go with this powder. And we'll see. But again, that's not something where I would be able to confidently tell you like that was worth the time to build it out, because that takes a ton of the team's time, copy, design, strategy, everything like that. And I don't know if that has actually lifted LTV of that product or not. And so that's what my trouble is a little bit as well. But yeah, we definitely look at it. The few things I can say, like if somebody's a high AOV on first purchase, they're likely to be a higher LTV person. If somebody buys cross category, they are likely to be higher LTV. And if somebody buys a kit or a bundle on first purchase, they're likely to be higher LTV. And so some of those we can definitely look at and say, hey, I'm willing to take slightly worse efficiency on acquisition there. Still profitable, but maybe slightly less because I know I'm going to get it back a little bit later on.
Yeah, we find the same thing, by the way. Like if you buy a 12-piece set, you obviously have the best first order, value, but over 12 months, like we haven't found anything to catch up to it yet. Maybe that's to come with some of these new funnels. But Connor, you guys have 3 or 4 different product categories, very different product categories. I'm pretty sure you have acquisition funnels built around most of them, if not all of them. Like, how do you think about like bottom line contribution margin or whatever profitability metric you look like in, let's say, wallets versus travel or rings?
Yeah. So we have acquisition funnels built out for each product category. So we'll look at things on like an AMER basis, and we allocate spend on that basis. We also look at what's essentially MER. So we won't distinguish between new and returning customers, and we'll do that by category. It's really trying to like slice it into different businesses. We call them different lines of businesses. And then we'll look at it from like how efficiently can we acquire a new customer here, and we're working on optimizing that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that's where that has had the biggest effect on our returning customer revenue, is acquiring customers in new categories that just naturally are worth more to us over time. The 3R, and I'll throw out some numbers here. Like our for a very long time, our wallet customer over the first 12 months was worth an additional $10. You get like $120 as a average order value. We get another $10 in the first 12 months. So it's like, we have to be profitable on our first order here. For rings, we get $10 in the first like 30 days. Even typically it ends up a little bit higher than that. So all of a sudden we've like compounded a year's worth of LTV from a wallet customer into a couple weeks from a ring customer. And travel is multiples of that. We have fewer travel customers, but just that 30-day period is significantly higher than even rings. So we're currently acquiring all customers profitably in all categories, but there is a path to them having the LTV where we might be better off optimizing for a 30-day contribution margin or a 60-day contribution margin, considering that it can end up being, there's a path to it being $50-$60 from some of these new categories.
What do you find for the rings? Why do you find, or what's the data showed you of why people are buying in? Are they buying different things? What have you found?
Yeah, totally. So that's one thing. So like wallets, which we sold for a very long time, you buy a wallet and it's like, we didn't have a natural like second thing. We sell a lot of key organizers. We did like 8 figures in those. Most of those are bought in the initial order. So typically if somebody decides they don't want the key organizer, they're not coming back on a second purchase. So we had these like massive constraints. And then what became like immediately clear with the ring customers are really 2 things. One, there's a certain type of person who owns multiple rings. There's fewer people who own multiple wallets. So we immediately benefit from that perspective. And then 2, the wallet's really cool. So we're acquiring all these guys who are getting married, getting wedding bands. We have an awesome package with the silicone band, a little travel case. Then they show up and they're like, hey, these wallets are also pretty cool. It's a very natural LTV item that we found really effective. And that's the same thing with travel, but travel has the additional benefit of there being a carry-on and a check-in and a backpack and packing cubes and a DOP kit. There's like a whole ecosystem around travel. So as we go through the new categories, they kind of just lend themselves better and better to second and third purchases.
Do you also feel like if your travel, LTV is pretty good, it's a lot easier. I don't know what your travel AOV is, but let's say it's a few $100s. It's easier to upsell a cheaper thing after they buy a more expensive thing versus it's probably more rare to get, the cheapest thing you own, whatever that is, and then to ask them to get the most expensive thing.
Totally. Yeah. I don't think in everything I just laid out, the AOVs are also going up. $100 wallets, $200 rings, $400 pieces of luggage. I don't think it's any coincidence that those people are also at that same rate more and more willing to come back for second and third purchases.
Do you guys find, and this question for both of you guys, in a consumable space, what is, I guess, counterintuitive to a lot of people is, you're actually going to lift LTV the most in the first 30 days. And you would think, people are going to have to see if they like it first and whatnot. And then also, people are going to be more often, they're going to buy the product they actually purchased more often than they're going to buy, an upsell, an additional one, which is, I think both of those are a little counterintuitive. What have you guys found for your businesses?
Yeah, we don't find that just because our most popular first time order product is a 12-piece set. So in terms of the, like that second order product being the same, like the number one second order product being the same product, that's not the case. It is actually pretty high. It's higher on the list than you would think because it's also a pretty giftable product. But almost like if you just look at all of our first time orders by product, as the value goes down, the amount of 30, 60, and 90-day increase in revenue goes up. Like as a hard and fast rule, like the 12-piece set has the worst 90-day LTV growth in terms of net dollars. 6-piece sets a little bit better than that. Starter bundles a little bit better than that. Individual products are all much better than the sets. So it's like the lower the first time order product is, the larger upside that person has in terms of net dollar growth, but not necessarily net revenue over all time, which is why we haven't stopped building funnels around the 12-piece set, because that's ultimately still getting us the most net revenue over all time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I would be curious, like, I don't know if you track in terms of like a profit over time, almost like a LTV or like a contribution. Like I would imagine what the reason you guys run it on 12-piece still is like the AOV is so much higher. So maybe you're increasing it less over time, but you're still able to drive the most volume at the best efficiency that still gives you that better performance over time.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, we're basically using that like blended CAC to track contribution margin on first order and over time. But also like for us, the 12-piece set, that is not optimized towards first time order velocity. Like that's one of the reasons I'm excited to roll out some funnels around these lower order value products, because even if we aren't as profitable on the first time order, like we are definitely going to have a lower acquisition cost on that. So our first time order velocity will go up, and there's value into bringing, more people into your ecosystem at a better rate. So I think it's what we're going to have to do is find that balance of like, all right, what once we get baseline data with all these product funnels, like what percent do we put into 12-piece set versus hex mills versus knives to like strike that balance between, first time order velocity and, like lifetime value contribution margin. We'll figure it out once we get that baseline data though.
So next, we're going to talk about two things: customer service and artificial intelligence. Our next sponsor, Richpanel, is a platform that combines the best of AI and humans to respond faster, manage all channels, and scale your customer service. They do this in a number of different ways, but their ultimate goal is for you to get every agent responding as if they're your best agent. First, my favorite part, which actually isn't AI related, is better self-serve tools so that your customers and prospects can find the information they need without ever submitting a ticket. But when they do submit a ticket, they have artificial intelligence that learn from your previous interactions. So it's not a ChatGPT wrapper that's just going to rattle off whatever it thinks is the best way to respond to a customer. It's actually going to understand what are historical interactions you've had to recommend and automate the responses to customers submitting new tickets, as well as new ways to augment your current agents so that they can respond more efficiently and empathetically. If you're interested in Richpanel and bringing AI to your customer service teams, visit richpanel.com.
So I know you were talking last week about like personas, and you believe that like the best way to reach like new audiences is to create new personas. I also feel like there's probably something to be said there, and this is more of an acquisition thing of, building out funnels. It's not necessarily instead of, so it's not that you're going to stop running any traffic on your 12-piece, but it's maybe there's a very different buyer who's going to buy, knives or a pepper mill or the pizza stone or something like that.
Oh my God,
and
yeah.
so
1000%. Totally. Yeah, I mean
that's
sorry,
kind of what we've done. Like we've got the higher AOV on our hero product Miracle Bomb, and we've actually had more of our spend go to a few like non-hero, kind of call them like a B or like B plus SKU, lower AOV. So I don't love that. It has definitely reduced our site-wide AOV, but I do think like the incremental reach has been helped, and they also do have like a better LTV. So there's probably some value in that for both of us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have this, we constantly say that we don't want to be a pots and pans brand. Like we want to be a kitchenware brand. And the only way you do that is by bringing people in on products that are not cookware. Like anybody that buys the 12-piece set from us or the 6-piece set up front, even if they bought a bunch of our other categories, they're always like, in the back of their mind, going to think of us as a pots and pans brand. Where if you come in and you bought the hex mill first, well, now you're starting to think of us in a totally different way. You're going to now go start talking to your friends about this cool hex mill. And then we're going to start to build that organic flywheel that we've built for cookware and knives and in hex mills. And that's where I think we build this reputation as a kitchenware brand. And that's like that requires bigger term, like larger picture thinking outside of just like this very in the weeds, like, well, it's not our best contribution margin on the first time order, so we should totally kill it. Like it's bigger picture, like strategy that you have to like, you kind of got to get out of your like super nerdy media buyer, like in the weeds analytics brain to like be like, it's okay if it's not as good of a contribution margin, like, and we're not going to put all of our budget towards it, but it still plays its role. But 1,000,000%, like we totally look at it like that. And what about you, Connor? I imagine you're probably similar, right? Like a wallet buyer versus a $300, carry-on's a totally different person, right?
Totally, yeah. And that's the big thing. Is like it ultimately goes back to this theme of incrementality. Like, is it an incremental buyer that's getting the? I pitched you on this months ago, but I'm like, yeah, the person living in their, studio apartment in New York City isn't getting the 12-piece set. They just don't have the room. Like that's a different buyer when they're buying the little. You guys already, I think you called it the New York City apartment set or something. So like, anyway, yeah, I think it's really
the
cool.
Apartment bundle.
Yeah. The categories are different for us. We saw an interesting thing. And this is funny because we're like back to acquisition here a little bit, but
I know.
We can't help it.
This is
my bad. I took
this
it
is yeah. You're the retention nihilist among us, Cody. You're just dragging us back to acquiring customers. No, this is an example of new products not necessarily being incremental. It was in a specific touch point. It was in some Facebook ads that we were running with our rings, where we have metal rings and we have silicone rings. And what we found in this funnel, we were testing landing pages. When silicone rings were included, we were activating like an incremental buyer. Conversion rate was up like 7%. But AOV was down so significantly because it wasn't like a net 7% of people were now purchasing the silicone rings. It was like 20% of people were opting into the silicone ring. So there was someone who was downgrading from metal to silicone. So we were thinking about it from that perspective too. So being thoughtful about where and why or where are products fitting into a certain funnel, and are they additive to the overall strategy?
For sure.
All right, let's we've been talking a lot about like lifetime value and overall like theory on retention, which has been great. I want to shift gears a little bit here, and we probably need another episode to just for this, but let's talk tactics, like retention tactics. I think generally speaking, people hear retention and they immediately think email, SMS, which for good reason, like that's probably the strongest channel for driving repeat orders. But like organic social is a retention channel. Community is a retention channel. Like a loyalty program is a retention channel. An app with like push notifications, these are all retention channels. So, and what I found is that like a lot of these retention channels are super complementary to one another, and maybe even more so than acquisition channels. So a good example of that is like we run loyalty ads at a very, very, very small percentage of our paid media budget for all of our new products that we drop in all of our categories. But in reality, these loyalty ads have great return on ad spend, as you could imagine, because it's low budget and it's a warm audience. But in reality, the real reason we're driving these or running these loyalty ads is because our product specific flows are triggered by on-site actions. So by running these loyalty ads, I'm driving traffic to a nice product page, and then the filter for that flow is has bought product before and has viewed, you know, any of these product pages or collection pages for the knives, right? So like we're basically building like a mini funnel within our like cross-sell flow here. So like they're super complementary to one another, but like, do you guys have any tactics within, it could be just within email, SMS, it could be at different channels, but any tactics that you think are either like super high performing or just interesting and exciting that you want to bring up and talk about how it's fit into your business? Cause like, I feel like we're constantly, at least at HexCloud, like uncovering these like fun ways to activate in these other channels that are super value added and are driving repeat orders.
I've got one here. It's a little bit different. But we went through a process last year of like making a really concerted effort to reactivate unengaged people on our email list. And we were working with a partner for it, but we basically took the like a couple million people who have been sitting in our list forever, who haven't opened emails in a long time, have like more or less been sunset. We identified like what emails were still active, and like we checked which would bounce. So there's like a cleaning process, and then we set up a flow that was like all meant to just be like engagement. It was all plain text emails. It was offer oriented. It was from a person. We were really trying to just get any sort of engagement to get these people reactivated. And I thought it was really interesting, and I can just see that those small tactics becoming more and more popular. I'm almost seeing like a little cottage industry pop up around retention for these people, like offering very like specific and narrow services for different parts of the customer journey.
We went live with them about a month ago with that same partner. So I'm excited. Actually, it reminds me to get some of the data, but I'm excited to see what we see with that strategy. And by the way, they are using it on a Snowflake warehouse, and they're measuring incrementality and measuring contribution margin of any of them. So that's why it passed my bar. But I'm excited about that, and I totally agree. I think that's like a nifty little tactic.
So what did that look like? So you're trying to basically you're reactivating folks that haven't made a purchase in a while, so they're on the verge of becoming like into this what you would call like an unengaged cohort of people, and you're implementing some sort of tactic to like re-engage those people and get them to make a purchase. Like what does that look like tactically inside of your channels?
Well, yeah. So this was just within Klaviyo at the time. It was like Q3 last year. These people were unengaged. Like we were no longer sending to them because they'd been defined as unengaged at some point. And then it was really just this process of list cleaning, identifying which were the higher quality. This was like the main data point we got from the partner. And then we set up this flow that like activated them over 3 or 4 messages. There was a unique offer attached to it. Like I said, it was all optimized for deliverability. That was like a key piece of it as well, all plain text. So that was like the overall, it was really just a full process. There are multiple tactics within that. But the idea of, hey, brands are sitting around, especially if you're Ridge, you've been around for 11 years now. Like there are lots of people whose you still own their contact information. Like you still have a relationship in some capacity. It just might take extra effort to actually activate it in some way. So I thought that was interesting. And Cody and I are using a partner, which is cool, but like, frankly, any brand could get value out of just making that process, like doing half of what I said, where it's like, we're going to identify these people, we're going to send them plain text emails, we're going to optimize for deliverability and engagement, and just think of anybody as like interacting with us at all as a win, I think is important. You're top of mind for a moment where if you don't go through that process, then these people might never hear from you again.
Mm-hmm. And what about, so staying within the tactics realm here, and I know Cody, you said you're not convinced that it's necessarily worthwhile of your time, but what about upsell and cross-sell tactics here? Because all of us have, Cody, you have a product that people are using that they need to reorder when they run out. Hexclad has, a bunch of categories, same with Ridge. So like we have spent a ton of time thinking about like, how do we, in the most smart way possible, upsell and cross-sell these people? So I'm curious first, like, what does the analytics portion look like prior to even going in and starting to execute? Like, what's the thinking that goes into deciding, like, someone just bought a wallet, like, now what? How do we get more value out of them? And then tactically inside of your channels, how are these things set up? Do you, maybe Cody, you wanna start off? Like, how are you thinking about getting someone to come back and buy more from you guys?
Yeah, and then I would love to answer this. I also have 2 tactical things that I would love to chat through after this as well, kind of on that note, and then another channel that I would love to talk through for retention. Yeah, I mean, I think it starts like we, really just any, off the shelf Shopify tool. We used to use Peel. Connor mentioned Lifetimely. Like I know you guys have your own CDP. We're in the process of, standing up a warehouse with Dacity. But you should be able to see, like I mentioned before, product journeys and, frequently bought together and things like that. I'm also, as you guys know, a very big fan of the qualitative data. So I'd love to ask people, how they're feeling about products, understand what their objections are, what caused them to love it, what are people saying that don't love it, and how can we, try to overcome some of those objections and getting them using the product properly with, proper education. So that stuff will build into the flows. So we're building like a little part of our site where we'll actually have like very educational pages, like educational web pages for each main product. We'll have a YouTube video, very educational long form YouTube video linked to that as well, and we'll really include that everywhere we can. In the box with a QR code that links to that. SMS flows, email flows. Again, it's not something I could tell you the effect of it. But I think that is using that mix of quantitative and then qualitative feedback to try to get something that has upsells and stuff like that, but also we're trying to play a little bit of like a longer term brand loyalty thing. So really getting them falling in love with the products before we're trying to just like jam stuff down their throat. But everyone's got to find what works best for them.
Yeah, I'm with Cody. I'll hit 2 quickly. One, I mean, we really think about when it comes to retention, we have like the very short term, someone's most likely to repurchase within 14, 30 days. It like slowly drops off over time. So it's like, we're doing email, we're doing SMS, like we're doing the basic stuff to try to like make the most of those periods. And then you think about LTV over a much longer period. And what I talk about with my team is like, at that point, retention is just keeping someone engaged. So like, what is the messaging and the frequency and like the experience of being a customer that makes you more likely to open an email 6 months from now, when we're launching a new product, which is when you'll actually be reactivated. So like distinguishing between returning customer revenue, I talk about it on a cohort level. We know that they are going to repurchase at some rate over time. And then these like reactivation moments where it's a sale period, it's a new product drop, we're doing some sort of exclusive offer. And then, like I said, we're not doing anything too crazy. We've got more or less the channels that everybody talks about. But to Cody's point, one thing we implemented last year, also can't speak to the efficacy of it from like a data perspective, but we redid our customer accounts, so just making it a better experience. You could track your order, submit a warranty if you need to. There's like some light product recommendations, with the idea being like, hey, if it's just a better experience being a Ridge customer, I would think somebody becomes more likely to come back. We know that people who do create accounts have like 3 times higher LTV. It's like, it is way higher, but it's still hard to say whether that's like truly incremental. Like those are also the people opening our emails and clicking on our SMSs. But that's like, I like that as a general practice. It's just like, yeah, just make it a good experience to be a customer.
Right.
Novel concept.
Not trying.
Yeah.
Well, I think people undervalue like email, SMS, and community and organic social is like, well, not organic social. I mean, I think people undervalue organic social as a retention channel. I think people undervalue email, SMS, and community as a brand building channel. Like it's the classic jab, punch approach that Gary Vee talks about. Like put your most engaging stuff out in email. Like that's where people are going to consume your content. Like if you have a really fun organic social post, like why not drive your why not drive your own media list to that? Like we do stuff like that all the time where it's educational on how to use the product, how to clean it, how to get the most out of it. But then we're also driving to like just really fun, engaging videos and images and like random stuff that all we're really optimizing there for is like an open rate and a click-through rate. But we know intuitively that when we do run that new product or we do run that sale, that stuff is leading to much better performance of that stuff. Because to your point, Connor, like their experience has just gotten so much better because you're actually, engaging them through education or entertainment, and you're not just trying to sell to them all the time. Like we're very like aware of that in our like calendar and making sure that like we have a good mix of like the 2 buckets ultimately in my like that I see it as is like engagement and direct response. And then you could do all sorts of like, subcategories under those 2, but you got to have a good mix of both because ultimately that does create the best experience for someone in, that's bought from you before. Cody, you said you had some things you wanted to dig deeper into?
Yeah. So one, as Connor was talking about, some of these re-engagement approaches with the email and offers. I had this thing again, as we learned from we've learned for a while, but definitely these surveys. We have so many people that are interested in our products and they just don't buy because they don't know how to pick their shade and do things like that. And there are some companies and there are some tools that do like a try before you buy type thing. And I don't know if we're quite at the point where we'd want to do that on acquisition and open up to everybody. It seems like a headache, but that's one of those things where we could probably try to isolate a segment of people that have, just like we think it would be very incremental and they're not going to buy unless we do that. And then that can be the offer for them. And so, I think a lot of times people would do like a discount to that audience or something like that. But we don't love doing that. And so that's something I'm very interested in trying. But yeah, direct mail. So how much direct mail do you guys run? I'm personally a huge fan. We don't have a huge retention team, so we haven't had the bandwidth to go super deep. So currently not doing that much right now, but we're planning in the future. And everything that we've ran, it's been great. And I think it's a really underutilized channel if you can use it properly. Do you guys do much?
We have done that. We haven't done it in a while, but it's also another one where it's pretty easy to do a holdout. Like if you're just thinking about direct mail from a retention perspective, it's exactly what we did. We targeted a group of people who were no longer opening emails. We had a holdout of those same people, and we just measured how many were reactivated in a given time and looked at the lift, and like very positive ROI. So a ton of work for like way harder than just sending more emails or Facebook ads or whatever. But I think there's a lot of potential there.
But you can also automate it. If you have the right partner. I agree. You should always do a holdout. Hopefully you can be like, hey, 60 days after somebody has joined our list, if they're interested in this product, but they haven't bought, like, let's send them a postcard and let's send them an offer for this or something like that. And you can just have that eventually be automated. So it's not that much, but yeah, I think it's going to be a big focus for us. So what I really want to get to, I would love to do like a quarterly catalog, kind of like a, J. Crew style, like fashion style, like editorial / product thing. Like I think those can crush if you do them properly, but it seems like that's like the biggest lift ever.
Yeah, and that's probably where we were doing like 24-page, because it's like it's not
Okay.
that much more expensive to send like a much bigger catalog. It's been a while since I've thought about the prices, but that's how we approach it. Way too much of a lift. When in reality, if we can automate 6x9 postcards to like a certain
Oh yeah, that's what I was
unengaged
talking
segment,
about. Yeah, that's what I was talking
that's
about.
great.
Yeah, that can be pretty profitable and incremental too, from what we found. Just an automated postcard, and definitely you got to. I'm not a retention expert, but you got to test different segments, because some of them that you think would perform well, don't, and so you got to test different lengths and time periods of like when their last order was to kind of find the right one. But like, yeah, you can set that up and have it be pretty low lift and have confidence that it's actually driving to what you care about.
Yeah, well, we definitely do campaigns, like big direct mail campaigns around our biggest tentpole moments, like BFCM and Holiday. What we're working towards right now, and you guys kind of mentioned this, is building it out into our life cycle. I think where it can be really effective is if you're sending direct mail, like you have segmentation, where you're only sending direct mail to people because they're not engaging with your other channels that you're trying to retain them in. So it's like, if this person hasn't engaged with an email or a text in 30 days, like then let's push them into this automation that sends a piece of direct mail. But there's no point in like, if someone's engaging with every email you send, like, do you really need to send them direct mail? Maybe during like a big campaign moment or to promote like a new product drop or something, so it has that sense of legitimacy. But like in an automated way, like that's where it becomes incremental, is if you're only sending it to people that aren't engaging with the other channels. So I know like PostScript can like integrate with Klaviyo or not PostScript, PostPilot, excuse me, can integrate with Klaviyo and do stuff like that. So that's what we're working towards right now. We're not fully there and building it out, but I think I'm really excited to see like what that does, and try to compare like the engagement rate or like the order rate from those people comparing to like the number of people that aren't engaging with our emails anymore will be really interesting to see.
And because I always bring it back to acquisition, we have a direct mail acquisition test launching with Haus and with PostPilot as well. I'm pumped about. We're running like a 70% holdout, net new acquisition, gift with purchase. We've tested once before, but not proper incrementality. So we're going to go cardalog, like three-page thing with a gift with purchase against a postcard, but actually measure incrementality, because I'm pumped about that as well. So I'm pretty bullish direct mail. I mean, at least for our demo, we're an older demo, but I would say in general, like if you're a more established brand, I think after SMS and email, that's probably like the next one that people should be starting to test.
What about community for you guys? Do you guys have big communities that you do a lot of activations in? Is that a channel that you spend a lot of time thinking about and creating content for and building campaigns around, or having it be part of a bigger campaign, like whether that's on Facebook or Reddit or wherever your guys' communities live? Connor, you wanna any thoughts on that?
My answer's no. Yeah, we don't do community all that well. We're on the social channels. We engage, like where we see community develop the most is how we engage with creators. And that's just very organic. That's not owned in any way. We don't have a Facebook group. We don't have a subreddit. So yeah, we're in very nascent stages in that sense.
We've got a Facebook group. It's got like almost 50K people in it. It's one of those things, like if I had to put a dollar amount on it, it would be tough. It's pretty wild. People are very loyal in there. It definitely drives value. What we'll do, and again, I don't know, some of these people would have purchased, but we have given them special offers the day before, just made stuff exclusive to them the day before, and we'll sell 500 to 800 units of something. And granted, a lot of them probably would have bought it the day of the actual launch, but it drives a good amount of revenue, even just like the UTMs we put in there, and like people will ask for product recommendations. People will share selfies. I have to believe it's had a huge lift, but it's not something I can put a dollar amount behind. But I mean, we're opening up a store in a few weeks, maybe the time this comes out in Chicago. And I saw somebody, we call it the roadies. So, it's JRB roadies. And I saw one of the roadies was like, "Oh, I'm thinking about flying from Colorado to Chicago for the store opening. Does anyone want to go with me?" And there's definitely some value that happens, and it's really cool, but I can't put a dollar amount behind it. But yeah, I think we can probably do more like in-person community, but that's what we've got. I think you guys have a group as well, right? Or maybe an unofficial one that grew.
Yeah, so we have this Cooking with Hexclad group. We do we have an amazing community manager, and we've spent a lot of time thinking about like how to keep them engaged and activated. One of my favorite things we do is we'll do like a true exclusive early release to these folks. So like for 48 hours, call it like a week or two or longer. So we're trying to actually make it even earlier. We'll say, hey, this is open to you guys now. Like, you get first dibs. Would a lot of those people ordered anyway? Absolutely. But I like it for two reasons. One, like it definitely increases brand loyalty. Like just the whole campaign of giving this very special group of people early access, like it shows that you're thinking about them. But what I really like more about it is if you're going to launch a product to the public like a month from now, but for the next 2 days, you release it to like a group of very loyal brand evangelists, and you get, let's say, like the pizza steal is a good example where we launched it for 48 hours, like 2 weeks prior to public launch. We got like 50 to 60 orders on it. Now, if you go and you look at our product page and the review section, all of the people that have left reviews there are from our Facebook page, and they're brand evangelists, and they just have written the dopest reviews. So now we're like driving everyone else to the page. We're about to launch acquisition around it. Like we have these amazing reviews from our Cooking with Hexclad people sitting there. So I think it can be really nice for things like that. Like we've even thought about doing like a custom Cooking with Hexclad apron at some point to like just like really increase that brand loyalty. I love community. I think it's like one of my favorite things to think about because all the different content pillars and like the types of things you can do are just so fun, like giveaways and like AMAs and like live streams only accessible to them. And it's really fun to see like how excited they get if you put in the effort to like do these activations. So I love working with our community manager. It's like one of my favorite bi-weekly one-on-ones I have, thinking about like what we're going to do in that group.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you're glowing, dude. Talking about
I know. I'm like, I wish
Yeah,
community
you're a
was
growth guy. What the hell?
I know. Well, we implement, like, we also like, we're super, I'm always like trying to get everyone to do like the growth, like tracking things too. So like, we're like staggering, like going back to the pizza steal, like we staggered the Cooking with Hexclad launch with the Nancy Silverton promotion with our own media promotion. So then like I can try to map out back end data to the different channels. Like we do use UTMs too, but it's like, all right, I know we launched Cooking with Hexclad at this time on this day. Nancy was at this time on this day. Our organic social was at this point, and then own media. So it's kind of fun to like try to map out like, well, this many returning orders came from the organic push, this much from this influencer, this much from Cooking with Hexclad. So we're definitely bringing a growth like measurement performance marketing lens to it, which is also fun to like see brand and growth kind of converge, because I've noticed more than ever that they're really not too different from one another. The goal is the same ultimately, to like, drive revenue and grow. And that is a wrap on episode 3 of the Marketing Operators. We hope you enjoyed. Please let us know if there's anything else that you'd like us to go deeper on in retention. Once again, thank you to our sponsors, Motion, Haus, Aftersell, and Richpanel. If you like the show, smash that subscribe button.